Good morning, distinguished guests, academicians, eminent speakers, delegates. Welcome you all to the first academic session of the International Seminar on Built Heritage of India, a Cultural Reminiscence. This first academic session will primarily deal with early settlements and building activities. We have two eminent speakers amongst us on the dais. Professor Alok Tripathi, who would speak on excavated structures of Ojiana, a Copper Age settlement. Professor Tripathi is Professor, Department of History, Assam University, Silchar, Assam. He will be followed by Professor Bibha Tripathi, Emeritus Professor, Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology. Built Heritage, a socio-cultural response would be her theme. This discussion will be coordinated by Professor Dr. B.R. Mani, former Director General, National Museum. In the first half, we'll have from 9:30 to 10, tentatively, and then from 10 to 10:30. After the two speakers, there will be a discussion for about 10 minutes. This particular session and the discussions would be coordinated by Dr. Mani. It's over to Dr. Mani now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here chairing the first academic session in which we have two speakers, very eminent scholars, Professor Alok Tripathi, who is a former colleague of mine in the Archaeological Survey of India, and who is at present Professor in the Department of History, Assam University, Silchar. And his topic is Excavated Structures of Ojiana, a Copper Age settlement. Ojiana is the site which he has excavated. And the second speaker is Professor Bibha Tripathi, eminent Professor, Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology of Banaras Hindu University, who had been one of our teachers and who is very well known about her researches on painted graveware as well as archaeometallurgy. And she will be presenting her paper on Built Heritage, a socio-cultural response. The world today has to choose between so many extremes that it is difficult to say what the present world would be like, say after quarter of a century. The past, with its miraculous achievements and emphasis on mass productions, should have paved the way to a greater human happiness, but far from it, it has barely helped mankind to devise new ways and means to a more complicated living. To come out from these complications of life, one has to develop the feeling of love and affection towards the cultural heritage of the country. And in this regard, this seminar has been organized by Ramakrishna Mission, and particularly I would like to thank the organizer, Professor Durga Basu, and her team. And now, without going into further details, I would request now Professor Alok Tripathi to please make his presentation on the subject excavated structures at Ojiana. Professor Alok Tripathi.
Caller mic दे दीजिए, that will be good. आ रहा है? Respected chairman and all the scholars present here. Today I feel blessed being here in Ramakrishna Mission, and before I start, I wish to pay my respect to Param Shraddhe Ramakrishna Paramhans, Ma Sharda, and the great thinker and philosopher Swami Vivekananda. As we heard yesterday, and they are the people who give us the direction, and that is what we need to follow. And I'll be coming on that while make my presentation. And before I start my presentation, let me tell you that you will find that most of the time, or when we excavated this site, we followed the approach what British has told us, because still we are following that old tradition when we work in archaeology. And as you all know, that Cunningham started with a prime objective of documentation. Even the Marshall writes that our job is to document and present the fact for the British scholars to interpret. And even today, after 17 years since independence, we are still following what they had told us. So most of the archaeologists in the field, they document and put the data for the interpretation of British intellectual or Europeans or Americans. And if you see in most of the cases, they are the people who interpret and they tell us what we were. And then in Indian universities, we teach our student what they are telling us. So this conference may be a turning point that now we start looking our things from our perspective. And once we do it, I am sure that we will be able to understand our culture and heritage better. We know that archaeological evidence are or can be grouped in 4 broad groups. They are artifacts, ecophytes, structure, and features related to human activities. So in this brief presentation, I'll be showing you last 2 groups, that is the structure, which is the main objective of this conference, and also the few features which are associated with human activity. And these 2 are more important because they are immovable. So therefore they speak about a particular place and they cannot be transferred from anywhere to any other place. And therefore, unlike the artifacts which can move from one place to another, the structure have more significance. Again, when we speak or talk about structure, then again we have to think about our approach. Yesterday, respected Dikshit ji told about the international charters, and among them the most important is the Venice Charter, which mention about ancient monuments as the living witness of their age-old tradition. And that is what we need to look. But again, we should know in reality, most of the monuments are seen as the dead buildings. And then they have to be seen in their setting. Now when we talk about archaeological structures excavated, in many cases we cannot see them in their real setting. Reason being that we are constrained by the certain principles and they do not allow us even to see their setting. We try to put them in chronological order, but even sometimes we can only see a part of it, not even the full structure. And based on that, whatever available, we try to understand the past societies. So, as you may be knowing, I am talking about a site which belonged to Ahad culture. I repeat, not Ahar, Ahad culture. And that is the location where you find them. That is the main concentration of Ahad culture in Rajasthan, near the bank or in the valley of Banas. And more than 100 sites have been explored so far. The culture extends down in Maharashtra up to Damabad, and in Madhya Pradesh up to Aran, Rajasthan of course. And these are the 4 important excavated sites which you see here. And among them, Ojiana is the northernmost. And it's unique because it's situated in Aravalli Hills, unlike all other sites which are close to river. This is just the location, and the site was excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India in 1919 up to 2001 under the direction of Shri B.R. Meena, my boss, and me jointly. And that is the location. You can have the idea. These are the Aravalli ranges, and this site is very unique because it's on the hill slope, which you generally don't find such sites. It's a photograph where you see. So this is the low-lying area where water get accumulated and the silt has deposited, which have become now a very fertile land. And probably this was the attraction which brought these people here, and they used to cultivate because we got a lot of grains from there, particularly wheat. This is the slope of the hill. A part of here was destroyed and disturbed. We conducted excavation there. I am just going to show you few to have an idea about the excavation, then I come on the structures. So black and red ware, which is the main feature of Ahad culture. These are some of the pots, and this particularly the white painted black and red ware, that is the diagnostic feature of Ahad civilized culture. These some of other pots, a big storage jar with applique designs, and these are again characteristic feature, copper objects. These are from Balathal, another excavated sites having the similarity, and a variety of bull figurine. And the unique thing was they were white painted, beautiful bull figurine. And that is one very important thing, the cow figure. You don't find cow generally on archaeological sites. You find the bull, but you don't get the cow. But here we had a number of cow figurines, human figures, decorated beads or spindle whorls, and Professor Sankalia had compared them with the other beads found in other countries, suggesting some sort of interaction or connection. Now we come to our trench and the excavation. So on this hill slope we conducted excavation, and here we found structures from 3 different phases. The earliest one down below here, which are not visible. This is phase 2, where a structure is there, it's a granary. And then we have these big structures of the second phase, and in the later phase we have some structure on the top. Here you can see a wall, and they were of late phase. This is a general view, and it shows Ahad culture is considered as a rural culture. So its importance is because undisputably it is an indigenous culture. That is one. And second, though it is believed to be an rural culture, but the kind of structures what we find here doesn't support that. So that again need to be, means we need to rethink, because you find a lot of public architecture here which generally you don't find in the rural settings. So these are the structure. It's a big house complex. Here you have a number of chamber, 1, 2, 3 and 4. This was for storage. I'll show you the close-ups. This is a kitchen where you have a 3 chula. There was a open courtyard, and there are parallel streets like the Harappans. I'm saying like Harappans. So they used to have a large house complexes, and at the slope there was a thick fortification all around the settlement, and this settlement is around 45 hectares, so not a small one. This is a close-up. This is the phase 2, which is we call the mature phase, and you see these chambers. The houses were made of stone, and the partition walls are made of mud brick, and there was a plaster. You can see the remains here. And another feature was that these houses were made without foundation, and that is what even today traditional houses in Aravalli, they start right on the rock surface, so they don't have, and even if you see in the south, if you go to Mahabalipuram and other places, they make houses or structures on rock, but for that they prepare the bed. They at least cut it and then they start their walls. But here in Aravallis, they construct their houses right above the bedrock without any preparation, and that tradition continues even today. People are living in nearby areas and constructing the houses in the same way. And before showing, let me also tell you that we did not find clear structure in phase 1, because when we went down, it's a deposit around 7.5 meter. So it's a huge deposit when we talk about Ahar culture. So when we go down, there are deposits. They are generally the destroyed mud bricks. And the kind of pottery which we find, it suggests that they were the people who came from somewhere, because you don't see the development. They are already developed. So fine variety of black, white painted, black and red ware starting right from the lowest layer. So they came from somewhere where they were making brick houses. They came and used that, but because being on the slope, and when there is heavy rains, they cannot stand there. So they got destroyed, and we got heaps of these mud bricks. And then in the second phase, then they moved from mud brick to stone architecture, and they started using locally available stone. And earlier the walls are thick, and then when they go in again upper portion, I am saying the sub-phase 2 of phase 2, where they started making thin walls. So we see how the architecture is developing there. They are moving from mud brick to stone, then thick walls of stone in early phase, and slowly as they develop, the thickness of the walls start reducing, and the size of the complexes they are bigger and bigger, multi-chambered houses. Then again, these structures, as the Venice Charter also says, are the living witness of the history. So even by seeing the structure, if we look at them carefully, they can tell about the people who were living in them, what they were doing, what the technology they had, what was the condition of the society, and even all other details we can get of it. And then if you see the way structures are built in phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3, one can clearly make out that how the things were changing. And the site was occupied for a very long time. So that is phase 2, which is the main, what we call, what had been called mature by Vashant Sinde and Poshel when they excavated Gilund, and Professor V.N. Mishra after working at Balathal. So that's the middle phase, which was the main prosperous phase. This is another one chamber where we have settle and coin in position. There is a place to sit and grind the grains. And there is a platform probably to keep the materials. And it is next to the kitchen. And in the kitchen there are 3 chula, 1, 2 and 3. of different sizes, smaller, a little bigger, and the biggest. So maybe the size of the family would have been bigger, so one chula is not sufficient. Like we have gas stove now with the 4 burners. So they had like this, and this was the tradition you find even in Balathal. These are the 2 chulas, but in Ojiana we find even 3. And these are the partition wall with mud brick, and the size of the brick is quite constant. I exactly don't recall, but it's not, ratio is not as of Harappan, but it's very proportionate to make the thin brick walls. And that is another important thing, as if you know that Dayaram Sahni, when excavated at Harappa, has noticed this Harappan ratio, 2 width equal to 1 length, and that was a very big advancement when as far as the building structures or building activity is concerned. This is one of the brick, and they are made of the same clay, and since they are sun dried, it becomes very difficult to differentiate them while excavating, because all surrounding material is the same as the material of the brick. And then they also had, for the storage of grains, they have this kind of silo which are partly dug inside, and then they had a stone these walls, and at the bottom they have put the pottery pieces, and very carefully that outer polished surface was on the top, and lower or inner portion, the surface was at the bottom. So like the tiles or the stone chips what we put today, they have made it for storage of their grains. And these are the streets, not straight, very straight, but parallel. So this is before excavation, when bogs are removed. So that is one street, and there is another street. If you see, this lady is standing. So these are the 2 parallel streets. In between there were these multi-chambered houses, and then outside there was a fortification wall. This is a close-up. Now we found only 2 structures of earlier phases, and the early structure of phase 2 was a granary. It was around 1.2 meter, its walls were around 1.2 meter in width, and it was filled with the wheat. And we found there was a fire, so this wheat got burned, and it was plastered. So we got a huge quantity of grains stored in that. And then after that there was another settlement where they had these structures. And when you have this kind of a structure, it clearly shows a proper town planning. And when you have a town planning, then you have to have some authority or administration to monitor it, and someone who is strictly regulating so that all the activities are in place. There is no encroachment here and there. Everybody is having the houses of the same width. The streets are clear. And when you move, I'll show you in later phase, these are the structure of phase 3. So when this authority, or when condition deteriorates, this authority becomes weak, people start making houses anywhere in any direction. And that is the example of later phase, where a house is built over the structures of phase 2 in a different direction, not following those directions which were followed by earlier phase. I'm trying to finish within 2 minutes. Sorry. So this is from the lower, and this is a thick fortification wall. It was originally this much thick. Later on it was added to give more width, and this is the footing of the wall. So, and this wall runs all around the structure. You see this, and these huge stones were kept outside, and the largest stone is almost 85 centimeter, and the thickness of the wall is more than 2 meter. This runs all around, and they used the natural rocks wherever they were. So there are no bastions, but to give a support wherever there was natural outcrop, they built a wall in between these two, and then it encircled the whole hill. In the third phase, people start making brick houses. It is between means in the street. So someone, just because old houses are there, you make another partition wall and you make a house. And this is how in the phase 3, not following any direction, not following the planning of the town. I'll call it a town because definitely it's not a village. And therefore the question comes whether we call the Ahad culture as a rural culture. Because even in Balathal, we have got the huge monumental structures. So definitely they may not be in the small villages. And then these are the features. In third phase, they started making these thick floors of mud, and these are the post holes which were used, and the superstructure used to be of the wattle and daub, for which we got clear indication. This is one. This is a burnt soil. Again, this settlement ended with a great fire, and you can see here the charcoal. So there was a post hole which got burnt, and the charcoal is in place. And all around you have these lumps of clay which were plastered on the wattle daub structure. They all got fired, and you have all impression of the reed on these lumps. Now, just few other things which I want to touch in. This is a faience bead which is found at Ojiana, and this is a bead from Harappa. So you can see the clear connection. So it was not only contemporary that we know the dates, but they were having, because on the other side of the Aravali, Harappan culture was flourishing in the mature phase. So they were not isolated, they were having a clear connection. We also have a terracotta disc, like the terracotta missiles what you find in Harappan civilization. So that is one. We have just these are the few pictures of other sites at Gilund. This is structure which was excavated in an excavation conducted by Professor Vasant Sinde and Poshel. These are the structures at Balathal. We know it was a structure like a castle, and all fortified town. This is a plan of Balathal. And this is a chronology which is given by other scholars based on their excavation. At Ojiana, we had collected a series of samples. Unfortunately, the whole thing was messed up, and the scientists of BSIP, and there is a paper published in Current Science. But let me tell you, don't believe on those C14 dates. They are all fake. They are all made up dates. So they are not the real dates. We had a real dates which we had, but the scientist of BSIP who did it, he produced his own date and published a paper in a reputed journal like the Current Science. So that is the reason till date we are unable to finish the report of the site, because all the samples, botanical samples and the charcoal samples which were given, so they all were messed up, and we can follow more or less this chronology because all the sites are of the same period. So right now we can put these structures in a broad means groups, but we cannot assign them the accurate date. So in future, if there are possibilities, we will try to recheck them, and then we will be able to tell exactly that when these changes were taking place. So I stop with this. So this structures at the site tells how the people came, they started living, and the earliest structure tells about the environment where they might have been living. And when they came to this hilly region, they adopted local technology. Means that was the experimentation. So they had a crude and thick structures. When with their experience, because it's a thick deposit, they lived there for more than 1,500 years. And during this, they got the experience. They started building, means they had a planning, they built proper structures, complexes, and then there was something that we cannot say what. So there was a weakening of that central authority. and the economic condition deteriorated. So instead of big houses, they started making mud houses, brick houses, and the structure of wattle and daub. And finally, in a fire, everything was destroyed, and after that we do not find any deposition on this site. So these structures are living witness of all the activities which happened at Ojiana, which is a unique site. And Ahar culture is one area where we need to work more, because it's an indigenous culture and it needs to be studied more in detail so that we can know about the history of India, or rather we call it Itihas, Bharat ka Itihas. Dhanyavad.
Some of the Ahar culture sites like Ojiana or Balathal, they are definitely not rural sites but townships, as proved by Professor Alok Tripathi, and I am thankful to him for completing his presentation within time. I would now request Professor Vibha Tripathi to kindly present her paper. Discussion last में करेंगे. We'll have discussions on both the papers at the end of Professor Vibha Tripathi's presentation.
आप सभी को मेरा प्रणाम है. आश्रम के महाराज जी लोग अगर यहाँ उपस्थित हों, उनको विशेष रूप से मैं नमन करती हूँ, प्रणाम करती हूँ. एंड आई एम थैंकफुल टू द ऑर्गेनाइजर्स, प्रोफेसर बासु, फॉर गिविंग मी दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी टू बी हियर एंड शेयर सम ऑफ माय थॉट्स विथ यू. When I was asked to, oh sorry, आप कर दीजिए इसको, यहाँ है. When I was asked to make a presentation on built heritage, and especially the built heritage of the early cultures, I was a bit confused, because in the scheme of heritage buildings, what comes to our head is normally the great buildings which are present in India as heritage structures, while they are completely lacking in the early settlements which I have been asked to talk on. But then I tried to spin up something for you so that we can look how things came up in course of the span of the millennia about which we talk as history of India. Especially when we talk of the early settlements and the building activities, the theme which was given to me, I had some problem. But then I'm here for you to see whether I have done justice to the subject. What is a settlement? Let me start from there. Settlement is a human occupation of an area which arises out of the need of people to go and settle at some place. And we come across some kind of a man-nature interaction in that. So I would like to focus more on the socio-cultural responses to human needs, and how they have been able to manage things and evolve a culture of their own as per the ecosystem in which the early human society tries to settle. We know that an area and nature of occupation and the type of culture which we find exhibits the level of sophistication attained by a particular society at a particular point of our history, cultural history. And the important structures of a specific age, if they are of very great strength, they do survive for long. I would like to focus, because India is a very diverse country with diverse type of ecosystem, so we have to confine any worthwhile or meaningful discourse in a very limited area, so that we can do justice to the subject. And if we talk of settlement or built heritage, we know that it is a consequence of expression of psycho-spiritual urge which is inherent in human society. And art and architecture and positioning of structures in a region may be some kind of a defining feature of a culture. So, and since buildings are very important and an integral part of settlements, I would be talking of that. And as I said, I would like to focus.
ये इसको आप अपने पास रखिए, इसे वहाँ मत लगाइए, इससे डिस्टर्ब होगा, इसको आप साइड में लगा दीजिए।
कहाँ से घुसाएगा?
यहाँ रख दीजिए, इसका सिग्नल सिस्टम आप कीजिए।
So how a settlement comes up? Because we need a settlement, we need to settle somewhere, and we know that necessity is mother of invention, so that is how a settlement comes up. The shape of a settlement also depends on variety of factors, and perhaps most restrictive kind of factor that we have is the geo-ecological system, because a settlement comes up in accordance with the situation where a community is trying to settle. There might be hills, there might be rivers, ponds, jheels, or that kind of a thing, or an alluvium. So it will develop, that settlement will develop in accordance with that settlement. And other factors which are there are the techno-economic capabilities of a society. What will be the nature of settlement will depend on the technological capability or the skill which people possess. And as my previous speaker, Professor Tripathi, pointed out, that organizational capacity is another important factor which influences the type of settlement. And of course, society plays a very, very dominant role. So all these factors, plus the spirit of innovation and creativity, that has to be the key factor of development and growth for a settlement. And naturally, the built heritage being part of it will develop accordingly. So since I would be dealing, because India is a very, very diverse geographical and ecologically diverse country, I would be forced to confine myself on a particular area, and I choose to do it on the Ganga plain, where I have been working all my life. And no need to emphasize that this is world's most fertile land and an extensive alluvial where people have settled, where civilizations have grown to a very large extent. But these alluvials are bounded by hills. On the upper side, on the northern part, we have the Himalayas, which are a bit far, but they provide all the rivers, all the resources, all the fertile soil which is there. And on the southern side, we have the hills of Vindhya and Kaimur belt. And in these hilly tracts of the Vindhya-Kaimur region, we have found world's, or at least India's, ancient most Paleolithic cultures. From Belan Valley, which is again in this very region, we have got Paleolithic settlements. And this region is also abound in caves and rock shelters where which may be termed as the early built heritage provided naturally to humankind. So this is the kind of ecosystem in which the this is Vindhya-Kaimur region. At the back you can see the hills, and we have these rivulets which is providing the basic need of water resource for the early settlers. We will see that there are so many. See, these are the rock shelters in which we find early paintings. This is a rock shelter in which I am standing. I am actually touching the upper part of the rock shelter where we find beautiful paintings. I think there's too much of light, so you cannot see much of the details of the paintings, etc. And this particular painting in the rock shelter I have put up to show that right from the Stone Age, Mesolithic, Neolithic to the early historic and almost historic period, this area was being visited at least by the community. In this, maybe this also is a passage through which there was a Uttarapat, Dakshinapat route was prevalent or popularly followed by people. So this is a Buddha image with Triratna kind of Kalash symbol in that same rock which I am showing you here. And nearby we have also got a big inscription, Ashokan inscription, which I have not shown here, but it was there on a rock face. So this is an area which was popular right from the Stone Age to historical period or early historical period. So these are other views of the same area where if we can call it built heritage, but built not built in that sense, but being occupied, being favored by the early communities which were not capable of really building it, but then they chose to settle for shelter in these areas. So these are some more rock paintings which I have put up to show how the early communities came and settled here. One is from the one on the right. This is from Bhimbetka, the famous site. Then these are all from the Gurgaon area south of Varanasi, where we find rock paintings, which are this one. If you look closely, which I think you will find difficult, you will find that there are some traces of domestication of animals. So we can reconstruct the entire span of historical events if we look at these paintings. And now let me come back and focus on the early protohistoric historic cultures of the Gangar plain. If we broadly divide them, then it starts from Neolithic, Chalcolithic culture, then it goes on into Iron Age culture, and a continuous history of at least 1 millennia we can reconstruct if we look at these cultures. Since the time is short, I would be very quickly rushing through these cultures and see what is the built heritage and how the settlements were coming up during pre-PGW, when we have black slipped ware and black and red ware culture in these parts. Then we have PGW culture, which is followed by NBPW culture without any break. So there's a continuum here. Then we have the Mauryan period, which synchronizes by later phase of the NBPW culture, and followed by the Shunga Kushana phase of culture. So at stage 1, where I have included both the pre-PGW and PGW culture, we can roughly date this between 1500 1600 BC. There are earlier dates as well, which go to about 2000 BC for the black and red ware, black slipped ware phenomena, and it goes up to about 700 600 BC period. What happens when we talk of the settlements? These are small settlements. There are thatched roofs, huts or wattle and daub houses. We find post holes, and towards the end it seems that there is a better system of building activity which is coming up. PGW culture is the very extensive culture of the proto-historic period. It extends from the Bahawalpur state of the modern Pakistan, where from we find large number of sites in the dried up bed of river Saraswati. Saraswati was very, very broad at initial stages, and on the outer bank of the Saraswati, of the dried up Saraswati I am talking about, there were Harappan sites. Then the river started shrinking, and PGW settlements, they are found right in the dried up bed. That means people were moving towards the river for settling down, and initially there are small settlements, then gradually it grows bigger, new features are added, like at Sonk near Mathura, there was a bund, there was some kind of a contraption to protect the site. Then there are water channels at Jakhera. At Bhagwanpura, late Joshi ji reported a big complex of 13 rooms, which is at a small rivulet, which is perhaps a remnant of the ancient Saraswati, which the local people call Saraswati. So the question here is, why do we find such changes? So this is the map of Ganga plain with PGW sites. You can see how there are hills on the Vindhya Kaimur belt here, then the Himalayas there. So in between we have these sites. During this phase of painted river culture, which stretches for at least 500-600 years, centuries, there is a change within the culture. Protection mechanism starts. I wonder against whom they were trying to protect themselves. Was it floods or other natural forces, or there was a fear of invasions, but something was there because of which they started to devise some kind of a fortification. It would be wrong to call it fortification, but something was coming up by way of protection mechanism around the sites. So if we look at the site of Eran, which is in Madhya Pradesh in district Sagar, where we find that in the Chalcolithic horizon we have a bund. Then there are similar structures at Jakhera, at Sonk, and somewhat similar at Atranji Kheda. There are water channels at Jakheda. In the Vedic literature, we come across a term called Kulya. That's a channel. So maybe there is a correspondence to that. So some roads have also been traced. So I'm putting up all this just to show that a very elementary nature of the PGW settlements at the initial stage, maybe around 1100, 1200 or 1000 BC. Then as the time advances, people learn many new things, and that is reflected in the settlement pattern of the culture. This is what I have borrowed from Joshiji's book. If I could expand this one, you see there are some huts, but then there are some bigger houses here. There is also a figure of horse or some animal tied down. That means people are trying to evolve a better lifestyle, a better building technique. So I would like to attribute all this to the socio-cultural response which is responsible for the culture change. What was happening during this phase? There were maybe political organizations which were coming up. If we look into the Vedic literature, we have clan-based society that graduates to kinship system and then to chiefdom, and from there at some point of time we have kings. Even Shatapat Brahman refers to kings of various types. Then economic prosperity is also coming up. We have agriculture. Somebody observed that all the crops which we are using now, they were present during the PGW or maybe even earlier than that cultural horizon. So wheat and barley and rice, along with most of the lentils and the oil seeds, they have all been found. So they had learnt how to cultivate both the crops, Rabi and Kharif as we know them. They were being cultivated in 1100, 1000 BC period. There were interactions, if I point out to the extent of the PGW culture which I have just now told you, we find that almost across this map there is a similarity. Then that means people are in contact. So trade and commerce of some denomination was taking place. Social organization, as said. PGW culture followed by the NBPW culture again. It's a beautiful pottery. Then we have a very good development in the field of metallurgy, which was not possible for a common person to achieve or to follow or to create. That means there were groups which were evolving as specialized groups for different crafts, for different techniques. And out of that grows a system which we call the Varna-based social system, in which in due course we have a hierarchy also, which we see in the later Vedic period. And in course of this, there is definitely development in material remains, in art and architecture, and there are finer aspects of culture like art, craft, literature, philosophy and music. If we look at the Samved, is the beginning of music, and philosophy, of course, the Vedas, as even Swamiji yesterday in his sort of invocation about the building blocks of Indian civilization, he pointed to all those factors which I cannot go back to now. So these were permanent settlements in the Ganga plain. PGW overlapping culture of the NBPW. We have political organization, we have fortified cities during the early phase of NBP at number of places like Rajgir, Pataliputra, Kumrahar became a great seat of power in due course. And at stage 2 we have mud bricks, and then stone comes to be used at later point of time. So the first cities show up. This graph is there to show that there is a gradual expanse of the settlement size from black and red ware to PGW and NBPW and then post NBPW culture. These are some important cities in the region I am talking about, which comes up by NBP period. You might all be aware of what is NBP, so I have put up this slide just to show you NBP shirts, how they look, how beautiful and how technologically advanced the pyrotechnology was, which produced this kind of pottery. The structures, these are again, I mean, there are post holes with round huts-like structure, which graduates to mud bricks and then baked bricks, and some new features were added, like we have these channels like civil amenities were developing. Again, most of the students of archaeology, they know that these are the civic amenities with ring wells. And this is a unique feature which has been discovered at the site of Kaushambi during NBP period. We have almost corbelled arch for disposal of water. These are pictures from the site excavated by BHU. I was instrumental in it. This is a well lined by wedge-shaped bricks. So how this is an underground structure. We could not reach to its lowest level because it was too deep for us to go any further. Some water came out. So this is another important feature. We have pottery drains, which is now connected to a wedge-shaped brick channel for disposal of water. So if we look at the early structures, this is the picture emerges during the first millennium BC. Since the time is short, I would be rushing through these. This is another often quoted or often showed revetment at the site of Kaushambi. The excavator, late Professor G.R. Sharma, attributed it to the NBPW period, that is somewhere around 7th, 6th century BC. We had such huge revetments with towers. This is a tower of the fortification. This is again a very interesting feature which we have at Patna and you see the use of wood in structures in a big way. So they are gradually learning to use various resources which were available there, and depiction of structures, the built heritage in the art remains. This is again one of the earliest stone structures for the Ajivikas, Mauryan period, in the Barabar hills. See the amount of skill and labor which must have gone to carve out the hill and to shape this kind of. You are all aware, this is Sarna, the Dhamek Stup, a brick encased stupa of the Mauryan period. The Mauryan art, part of the built heritage again, for which India is famous, the famous Mauryan polish, and the proportionate figures of the animals and the human, this great chauri bearer, which is a masterpiece, I should say, kept in Patna Museum. You are all familiar with this Sanchi. Why I chose this? Because basically a religious structure, but it gives us very close glimpse of life during the contemporary period. Again, all these panels, they show the various types of structures which were in vogue during that period. Look at this, the arched windows the multi-storied houses. This is another unique example. So look, if we look closely, if we have time, we will find there are different types of structures which were in use during the Shunga Kushana period, as seen at the structures as Sanchi and Bharhut. So if I conclude, I would like to attribute all this to as a socio-cultural response of the society in creation of their culture. The early Vedic period, which was clan-based, as I said, then later Vedic period, there is some more development. Then there are Ganasanghas during the Buddhist period. Buddha was born in Lichavi, and his wife was a queen from that. And they were by 600 BC. Vaishali is famous for a number of structures. You all know, I have little time. And Buddhist literature mentions that there were at least 4 or 5 cities before Buddha was born. Kaushambi, Varanasi, Vaishali, Champa, Rajgir. Later we have Shravasti, Mathura, Kampil, Bairad, Pratishthan, etc. And during this period, because of the way of worship of the Buddhist and Jain sects, we come across buildings of like viharas, stupas, rock cut architectures, pillars, and the political patronage played a key role in doing this, supporting the religio-philosophical developments, and trade commerce flourished, and that also had given a strong patronage to art. The case of Anath Pindak is known to us all, how he covered the entire surface of the orchard because he wanted to give that orchard to Buddha. So religion was again another force to reckon with when we come to discuss the religio, discuss the building heritage of India. We have chaityas and viharas and so on. Later we have temples which also started coming up. Many of it evolved because of cultural interactions India had during the Buddhist period with the Greeks and other world forces. Some of its impact is visible. So interactions, they actually enriched our culture. So an exposure to new ideas and availability of better technological skill contributed to all this. And ये थोड़ा ऊपर जा सकता है क्या? Anyway, at the end, what I have written, that we need to conserve and preserve our built heritage and the culture about which we are so concerned, and it becomes much more relevant today than it was ever before. So thank you very much. So I have tried to summarize a very long span of time, and maybe I overstepped my time, but I think the chairperson knows me, and so he has excused me for doing this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for very clearly analyzing the socio-cultural response of built heritage, right from pre-painted graveware through painted graveware and northern black polished ware cultures. We have some time for, I think, very pertinent questions, maybe 3-4 pertinent questions from both the speakers. So now the floor is open for questions or suggestions. Yes.
हेलो, डॉक्टर आलोक ने ओजियाना को जब स्लाइड्स दिखा रहे थे तो ही हैज शोन अस द टेपरिंग वॉल, कि बेस में चौड़ा काफी बेस है पत्थर का एंड इट इज टेपरिंग अपवर्ड्स। हमको कितना बड़ा भूल है कि व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द तुगलक आर्किटेक्चर दे से कि तुगलक ब्रॉट दिस टेपरिंग सिस्टम ऑफ आर्किटेक्चर। ये तो हमारा एंशिएंट सिस्टम है, इट्स वेरी ओल्ड and in all the books we are writing that tapering walls were introduced by the Tughlaqs in Indian architecture. This is quite clear. So your observation is very important that at the base we have the very wide base at the plinth and it is coming up and coming to the surmise on the top of it, it is tapering. So this is my observation, I wanted to make it.
Any other question? Yes, Dikshit ji. After Dikshit ji.
In fact, both these speakers, and this is not the first time that I am hearing them, they are one of the most renowned specialists of the country. But there are certain things which were not solved, but they have been taken for granted. For example, the Bhagwanpura evidence or Katpalo evidence and other things, which there are no sites, in fact, nearby, whether it is Alamgirpur or whether it is Hulas or whether it is Rupar, where the overlap between the Harappa and the painted Gevar has been found. This is only the theory of J.P. Joshi. No excavator in the country has reported that. Sometime under pressure also they do it, like at G.B. Sharma in a very late stage has done it. So I was just surprised that these old stories with no foundation, they are still carrying and passed on to the next generation. But as far as their own narrative is concerned, which may they are telling, and there are certain things, there is a clear-cut division, and that's why we call it, one is the Vedic and the other is later Vedic. Because when we come only to Ganga Valley, we talk about the later Vedic period, and generally most of the scholars connect it with the painted Gevar after the excavation at Hastinapur. Before that, there was nothing like that which anybody has mentioned, except for the first time when it was found at Aichatra in the level of painted Gevar and BP together. So this is, still I am feeling that there is a gap, and that gap has not been filled up. Whereas painted Gevar continued with NBP, which by chance, or what were the reasons, because of the flood or anything, which happened also at Bhagwanpura, Hastinapur, that these things are. Otherwise, there is no gap, because at Hastinapur, there is a gap between the painted Gevar and NBP, but most of the sites excavated, and if I am not wrong, NBP is the most excavated sites in the country, and it is only from the city sites that you are getting the better antiquities, better pottery, because NBP is a pottery of the city sites. When you go to the same period and excavate the rural site, you don't get the other things. This I am telling you because the best kind of the NBP and others, they are available. In the rural site, generally, I am telling you, in the rural site, you are getting the associated wares and others, and sometimes you don't get even the NBP.
पहले एक काम कर लो, पहले सबके क्वेश्चन ले लें, पहले क्वेश्चन ले लीजिए। ऑन है।
दीक्षित जी, जो आपने बात कही वो बिल्कुल सही कही, और उसमें कोई समस्या नहीं है हम लोग को मानने में, लेकिन जोशी जी ने जो रिपोर्ट किया है वो चूंकि डिफेंड करने के लिए नहीं है, इसलिए आई हैव टू ऑनर हिम। और वो एविडेंस जैसा भी उन्होंने कहा, और दूसरी बात यह है कि जो अभी हमारा विषय था उसमें गैप बिटवीन हड़प्पा एंड पीजीडब्ल्यू वाज नॉट द इशू एट ऑल। तो वो हाँ, इट वाज मोर बिटवीन पीजीडब्ल्यू एंड एनबीपी, और उसमें की कंटिन्यूटी में कहीं कोई वो नहीं है। लेकिन अब तो बड़ा डिबेट हो जाएगा।
Sir, Professor Vibha Tripathi wanted to concentrate on Ganga Plains. So she was not talking about Harappan culture. So that is why she has kept pre-painted river, painted river and NBP. Would you like to?
No, I am not going to speak on Harappa or PGW, but on related issue I want to give an example because it's related. If those who have heard me online, I tell, if you read, Alexander Cunningham, the Director General, reported that thousands of coins are found at Harappa when he was the Director General. Then Dayaram Sahni, who was a superintendent, when he excavates, he writes that the general was factually incorrect. And that is a British period. He was an Indian, only a superintendent. But he wrote that Director General, the first Director General, Sir Alexander Cunningham, was factually incorrect. So that is how archaeologists work. So I am talking on related issue. And even Marshall, in his report, he criticized Alexander Cunningham that he destroyed monuments of Sanchi. So one Director General in official report of ASI is criticizing the work of another Director General of ASI. A superintendent saying that the Director General was wrong. This is how archaeologists work, based on evidence. Doesn't matter who is what. That is what I want to say.
Professor Martinendan Prasad Tiwari. Yeah, this is last question.
Hello. What always puzzles me, and my question may not be directly related to what the speakers have spoken on, but it addresses, or rather needs, the attention of all the archaeologists. In the early phase, we do find the settlement area as well as the temples or religious edifices, whatever form, existing together. But right from, as far as I know, Sanchi, Mathura, Devgarh, Khajuraho, Bhubaneswar, big built heritage we find. But where are the settlement area, where are the people living, उसके उदाहरण हमको क्यों नहीं मिलते हैं? यह एक ऐसा प्रश्न है कि अगर कहीं से कोई संकेत मिल जाए तो मुझे अच्छा लगेगा।
सबके तो सेटलमेंट्स हैं, एनबीपी के सेटलमेंट्स तो बहुत सारे हैं।
One of the reason is we have not worked, when I am talking about archaeology, okay, very clearly, as a problem-oriented works. We have worked in bits and pieces, and there have been a fascination for exposure of structures. That was the early phase, and even so wherever there was the big monuments or big structure, people have worked there. I can give you one example of Mahabalipuram, where I have worked. So there is a lot of work on art and architecture. There is a settlement also, but nobody has worked. K.T. Narasimhan has conducted excavation. He has excavated some brick structures. A small work. After that, nobody took interest in that, because these rock-cut structures, Rath, and these structural temples, Shore temple, they are so famous that people do not bother about them, and they are very much there. We know there is a huge sand deposit. You have to remove it, and it's very much there. So there are indications, but only thing is we are not focusing, we are not studying the whole thing. As in archaeology, we hardly pay any attention to setting, and that is what needed. So we just pick up one monument, art and architecture, focus on that, not with many other things. So that is one of the reasons. We can find it.
There are reports on Vaishali, Kumrahar, and they are talking about the general cultural background of that site.
No,
It's
even
not focused
the
only
sites
on-
like fortified sites like Koshambi or etc., they all have settlements.
Earlier it was there, I said, and you all are telling, and I also know
I think we'll discuss it later on, because I have been told that now we have to conclude it at this baad mein. So all the three Tripathis here sitting on this dais are now we pay our respect to the Swamijis of the Ramakrishna Mission, and to all of you who are present in this hall. Thank you very much.